All right, man. Today is Thursday. It is January 8th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Sitting here with Chief. Some stuff went down over the break, so we want to talk about it. Venezuela.
Say it again.
Do we own Venezuela?
Why are you saying it like that?
What am I doing wrong?
Venezuela. You know you're pronounced.
I swear to God.
Try it again.
Venezuela.
Why you're adding a syllable, dude?
Which one? Venezuela?
We're off to a rough start.
Venezuela.
Not Venezuela.
All right, my apologies.
Mixing Venezuela and Somalia.
Yeah.
Venezuela. I don't know what I was doing.
Venezuela. You're adding an I at the end when it doesn't exist.
Venezuela. Okay.
Field.
I'm on the same playing field. I swear I wasn't doing that intentionally.
Okay.
We've
rough start to the podcast.
Really? Yeah, but tomato.
Mm-hmm.
We've done an episode on them before.
Okay.
Way.
How long ago?
Dude,
2019 State Farm Office or Farmers Insurance Office?
I think Farmers Insurance.
Okay.
I think
I have a vague memory of this.
Basically about how their whole economy was.
Yeah. That's the crux of what's still the issue here.
Yeah, so from what I remember, the most was that a gallon of milk there was something astronomical. And it was forcing many of their residents to basically starve and be homeless.
Yeah.
So a lot of problems.
And this is, we can kind of look at it as like a tale of two countries between them and a place like Norway. And there's this kind of old cliche called, it's called many different things, but like Dutch disease, where you have like a resource curse. And you could even say that the United States has that with the dollar. The dollar is like our resources. So we're in a debt trap effectively too. But Venezuela, you look at that place and they have the largest natural oil fields in the world. So they're known oil fields. So more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, more than Iraq, more than anywhere else in the world. They are sitting on black gold, and they have been for nearly 100 years. They first discovered oil in Venezuela in the 1920s. And with that came, it was good timing for them too, because that's like when we switched over from all these other kind of energy resources and really modernized the energy sector, and we became like an oil dependent globe, where that was the number one resource to have, and they had the most. And by the 1950s, Venezuela was booming. So they had all kinds of people immigrating from Europe. So the same thing that we had in the the 19th century, where you had people from Ireland and Italy and Poland and Germany. These people who were poor in other countries were like, we got to get out of here. Where should we go? And at that time, it was just like, well, what do we choose between America, Canada, Australia, or Venezuela and Argentina? Like, those were the places that people were really looking. And a lot of people went to Venezuela, and they had this booming economy. So they're obviously, where it is on a map, right? Mm-hmm. So the very tip top of South America, up against the Caribbean Sea, and they have all this oil. And then because their geography, they actually have a ton of farmland too. So where Brazil, they have to like cut down the rainforest. Venezuela has rainforest, but they also have these vast valleys where they're able to grow and do like traditional kind of feed crops. And so by the 1950s, with the oil and with everything else, Venezuela had a higher GDP per capita than England, than Great Britain. So you talk about like it is one of the highest standards of living. They were building these booming skyscrapers in Caracas. They had like a good financial sector, a growing middle class. It was like,
and this was solely because they had so much oil under them.
That was a big part of it, but that's kind of what we're going to get into, is like the trap of having one resource. And so they really kind of fell into this trap. So when they were using oil, they were using oil, and it was kind of more responsible originally. And they had a lot of foreign investment. So United States oil companies, British, Dutch, and they would have these means of, they had like real businesses. And then that created really good jobs in the oil industry, but they were also supplying their own food. They were doing all these things. So they were using the oil, but it wasn't like the only thing going on. Like you could have a good life completely outside of the oil industry, and they were this booming, growing country. And then you fast forward to 1976, they had a president who decided to nationalize the oil. And it was like a pretty popular platform policy, because it was like, hey, like we have all these kind of imperialistic, talking about us, basically United States, Western Europe, coming in here, and they're doing the oil and they're providing jobs, but then they're taking all the profits. So we're going to start up our own oil company. We're effectively going to kick out a lot of these, big Exxon Mobil type companies, kick them out, and we're going to nationalize. And we're going to have like our basically one big Venezuelan oil company that is state run and state controlled, which you see that in other places too. You see that where they work in partnership in the Middle East and in other places. I mean, even Alaska pays its citizens a dividend of oil sales. So that's not like uncommon. And then in 1976, like you've seen Miracle, we've talked about that.
Yeah.
So you know about the gas crisis, right? Mm-hmm. So oil had shot up. It was so expensive. And so when they nationalized it, originally it was like working well for them, because they were able to kind of pay for everything. So when other places, there were oil shortages around the world and it was over $100 a barrel, that's good if you're Venezuela at that time. So they were making money hand over fist, and they started to get this, what they call this Dutch disease, where the oil became, instead of part of the economy, it was the only part of the economy. So they ended up using the oil to fund new industries, infrastructure, all these things that they were saying, like, that's how it started, which is not necessarily bad either. And then in the 80s, oil crashed. So you had created all these kind of government entitlement programs, all these government work programs. And when the oil price crashed, because they, in that short period of time from 76 to the mid 80s, they got so dependent on the money from oil that it was like when the oil kind of money dried up or took a big dip because of the global market price, they're like, oh, fuck. Because now the people have become, they weren't really taxing people to pay for any of this. They're just, all of these government programs were really just funded by oil. So when the oil market crashed, then it was like, well, we can't take away all these programs that we've instituted and all these jobs that we've created, because it went from being like a small percentage of the population were employed by the government to like a massive. So it's like, if you're taxing people, but you're paying them with tax dollars anyways, it's like you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's like the great debate between like free market economists and like these kind of more socialist policies, where it's like, if everybody's being taxed and you're also like their income is paid by tax dollars and you're taxing them, it's just like a negative spiral all the way down. So by the end of the 80s, Venezuela, because everything, when you have a really strong currency, like your currency is worth a lot, and it was based upon the oil because everything was tied to oil, it makes it very difficult to export products, because on the global market, it's like, well, it costs a lot here because our currency is so high, but you just can't sell it into foreign markets, because it's just like, well, the Venezuela, making it up, like a Venezuela grain or a banana or whatever, is too expensive compared to these other places. So a strong economy based on one thing is not necessarily good. So then it became, well, like, why would we even grow our own food here? We can just buy it cheaper. So you saw all these farms kind of shut down. Okay, so they're not really producing their own food. Then there was like all these, well, why are we investing in Venezuela at all? Why are we making anything in Venezuela at all? We'll just use the strength of the oil to go buy everything. So then they went from having a very diverse economy, kind of self-sufficient across the board, from financial, agriculture, they had many different sectors, to where it's like, our dollar and our currency is so strong based upon oil that it doesn't make any sense to start a business. Well, why would I start a business or work for a private company? I'll just get a government job. So then with that, because no one's ever really held accountable in those, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of instability. So you had in the late 80s and 90s all these different like boom and bust cycles, and people went from living the high life in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to being all of a sudden be like, oh, what the fuck? Like, we can't get food. Like, there's runaway inflation. We're in all kinds of big trouble. So Hugo Chavez, who is a military guy, and he's a precursor to Maduro, he tried to do a military coup in 1992 that failed, and then he ran for president through like the democratic process in Venezuela in 98 on being like, these political elites have completely fucked our country. We have to take it back from them. And he wins by like a pretty wide margin in 1998. So he takes power. Then he kind of just becomes a dictator. So, and none of the problems stop. He keeps borrowing money. The oil industry that they had nationalized, there were no like institutions in place to really have guardrails against it. So it was all just like very short term. Let's extract as much money as we can and try to keep things going. Chavez dies, and
real quick, did they fuck up because they made poor decisions, or did they fuck up because they were doing what's in the best interest for them?
Both.
Okay.
So it's and this goes back to that Dutch disease, which is the Dutch found oil in the North Sea in the 60s. And they went through a very similar process where they couldn't export anything besides oil because their currency was so strong based upon the oil that when the oil prices dropped, the Dutch economy, so that's where it comes from. Like, they were the first ones to really have this problem. The difference there was that they had stronger political institutions, where it's like there was general respect for the rule of law, so there was less corruption. There was like their laws were enforceable. It wasn't just like this might makes right, which I'm sure we'll get back to in regards to this actual Maduro thing. And so when Chavez dies and Maduro takes over, who was his bus driver, but to answer your question, it was very short-term thinking, where if you look at a country like Norway was the poorest country in Europe in the 60s. And other countries, the UK, the Netherlands, maybe Denmark too, where they're looking at the North Sea. They're doing all this oil exploration because they had found some. So Norway paid, I want to say it was Exxon, to do all these different, explorations, like, hey, can we strike rich here on oil too? Do we have it? And they did like 100 different prospecting sites in the North Sea, coming up dry. Then they finally hit one in like 1968 when they're still the poorest country in Europe, and it was like a gusher. So it's like, holy shit, Norway has a shit ton of oil underneath the ocean off their coast. So then Norway set up this program because, again, they had like strong government institutions and strong, like, the rule of law and all this kind of stuff, where they passed a law where it's like, all right, max 4% of our budget can be supplied by oil. Everything else gets paid in like kind of dividends to the citizens, and then is put into this big sovereign wealth fund. So you hear about like the Saudi Arabia, they're trying to diversify their economy now, where they're doing this sovereign wealth fund. So they do investments in all sorts of different things in the market, basically, and then they'll use the oil sparingly to build up their economy. And it's worked brilliantly. Now Norway, they have like an extremely high standard of living. They have a diversified economy, because back before oil, really all Norway had was like these little fishing villages. And that was it. They had some like coal. That's kind of one of the reasons why the Nazis went in there in 1942. They were trying to secure some energy. But they were like a poor country. And now they're one of the richest in Europe because they managed their natural resource wealth very strictly, and they didn't allow it to become like this trap where they're just like, we got all this money right in front of us, what do we do with it? And so instead of like saving it and using it smartly, Venezuela, by contrast, they just like kept dipping into it. So then you would have like these, oil goes up and down and over the course of the year and decade and all that kind of stuff. So they were very susceptible to that. And then they had, because the oil had really taken over every aspect of that country's economy, when it dipped, it got really bad. So then all of a sudden, like, you do have to import food and you just can't, like, it's so expensive. So then you have this runaway inflation where there was examples of like a teacher wouldn't be able to buy a carton of eggs with a year's salary. Like, that's how insane.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So then, I want to say probably the last time we were doing this podcast, it was a big controversy, which I'm surprised is not being talked about more this week, where they outlawed hospitals putting the cause of death for children as starvation. Because they had so many kids that were malnourished, just dying of hunger, literally dying of hunger, that they made it illegal for doctors to put as cause of death famine.
I remember that too.
So like that's like so fucked up. And then they have stabilized it a little bit in the last 5 years or so since we did that podcast, where it's not as dire, but it's still really fucking bad. And because they never managed that resource accordingly. And you have this guy Maduro, who was Chavez's like a bus driver and a yes man, who when Chavez died, he ascended to power and just held on to it. So they're trying to get in bed with like the BRICS nations.
And how did he die again?
Hugo Chavez?
Is it kind of just like a natural thing?
Let's look that up. Cause of death. He died from cancer. Long battle with the disease, though the exact type of cancer was never officially disclosed by the Venezuelan government. They announced his death on March 5th, 2013, at age 58. So then Maduro's in power, and he's no better or probably worse, and they don't have like real elections, and so any oil that they are producing, which a lot of their wells and refineries have just been shut down. So they're just kind of like, they have this oil, this vast wealth, but they can't get it on their own. But they've kicked out all the, energy companies that would be able to help them, because they're like, we're not going to do business with them. Like, we'll never see the money. So it's not a good investment for these companies to go in there necessarily. They had it. I think the government was sued by ExxonMobil for like, because I think ExxonMobil was owed like 1.7 billion, which is not like a crazy number for them necessarily. But it's like, all right, but no one's there to enforce it. So it's just like, get fucked. And so even though they have this oil, they're not able to really get it to market, because the entire, their entire state-owned oil company is basically just rotten from the inside. So they're not able to even get the money that they were previously getting, where you see the vast wealth created in the Middle East from Qatar and UAE and Saudi Arabia and all these places with a ton of oil and natural gas all across, all these different countries that, or at least the leaders, make a shit ton of money just on the oil. That was not really happening in Venezuela. It was kind of just like Maduro was just doing it. And then they had the whole thing where he's been, kind of classified as an enemy of the state for a long time. It's not just a Trump thing. And I think Biden technically indicted him in 2022. And then we saw over the holiday break, we've been sinking drug boats, and it was like, this is fucking weird. Like you would see these kind of grainy footages of just different boats being blown up. I'm like, oh, they're running drugs. So it's like, okay. And then they finally go in and snatch him, which was, it's like, I've never seen anything quite like that. And they bring him to New York. So I don't know, he's sharing a cell with Diddy or something in that correctional facility, and they're bringing him up on these charges. But then I want to say, let's make sure we're up to date on this. We're recording this Wednesday the 7th.
That they dropped one of them, right?
They dropped the drug charges.
Yeah.
So then it's like, what do you actually... Justice Department drops claim that Venezuela's Carte de los Soles is an actual group. So then what is he actually charged with? They pled not guilty to federal drug trafficking and other charges on Monday before a judge in a federal courthouse. They were being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn after being captured. Maduro saying, I'm still the president, And then Trump's just like, yeah, we're gonna run Venezuela, and we're gonna get that oil out. So it's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. There's never been anything quite like this where they've arrested a sitting president without congressional authority or anything. They've obviously knocked out, in the history of the United States post World War II, they've knocked out a shit ton of leaders. Like, that's where it's like it feels a little bit hypocritical, where you had Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. I think, what year was that? 2012, 2014, something like that, where NATO, it was kind of led by France, but nothing gets done without our say-so. And there's a clip of Hillary Clinton being like, we came, we saw, he died. And she's like cackling and laughing over the fact that Gaddafi like was finally toppled. And he was a terrorist in the 80s, and there's all kinds of conspiracy theories around how he wanted to have like a Bank of Africa, and it was going to be on the gold standard and all this kind of stuff, and they had a ton of oil. But they knock him out. Do you know how he died?
No.
He was sodomized to death.
What?
Yes. And so there's like all the big cheers going on around like his death.
By who?
By the people.
Yeah, you've never seen this? It was like almost like a joke in middle school. People would try to like take like a ruler and then like stab you in the ass with it and call it getting Gaddafiing.
No.
You got Gaddafi'd.
I did not.
Yeah.
Did not.
Yeah. So it's like technically, they say he died from gunshots to the head and abdomen, but he was getting Gaddafi.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I don't know. So like that part of it feels like this is better than that, but I don't know why one is celebrated and the other is like being criticized. I think they're both bad. I don't know why we keep going into all these different places, and it just feels like a big distraction. And this is, when Trump was on the campaign trail, like, yeah, like I'm the only president not to start a new war and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I don't think any of his voters were like, we got to get Trump in there so we can get Maduro fucking out. Like, most Americans don't know what the fuck is going on in Venezuela. You can't even pronounce it. And I think that's how I feel. It would be nice if for those people, if they could have a functioning government and like the oil is sold on the world market and their economy comes back, and you don't have people starving to death. The average Venezuelan during that famine lost 27 pounds just because there was no food.
That's crazy.
So it's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, you don't want people to have to live like that. But then I don't think it's like a might makes right, where it's just like, hey, we're the big dog. We can just go and do whatever we want. We can just have this president of a foreign country, and we go in there and just snatch him up in the night, bomb a few things, kill a couple people, and get him out of there.
What's the only real, because this is kind of becoming a thing where nothing surprises you anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I remember sitting there and it was like, oh, we just bombed Iran.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just captured the president of Venezuela. Like, okay. Like, it's shocking how it's becoming not shocking anymore.
Yeah, and because it's just one thing after another, and like no one even talks about like Ukraine, Russia's still going on.
Yeah.
That's still going on. Obviously, what's going on in Israel and Palestine is still going on, because that was like the other thing. Trump, I'll get both of those things done in a week, and it's like they're still going on. And if you can just arrest the leaders of nation whenever you feel like it, well, is there something you could charge Benjamin Netanyahu with? Probably. Okay, like everyone's seen that in 4K over the last 2 years. So there's lots to, like, if this is the new standard where you can just go and arrest world leaders that you don't like or agree with,
it'd be a slippery slope.
It's a very slippery slope, and it's one, it's who else? So it's like, I would think with our military, in theory, we could do that to just about anybody. We can go in the night with our Delta Force or Navy SEALs and have a few explosions and air support and snatch up whoever we want.
Is there any validity that him being guarded by Cubans? Did you hear that?
I have heard that that's
one thing that I saw, and I was like,
personal security detail is Cubans,
and that's because they don't trust their people.
I think that could be. So if you're going to try to prevent a coup, okay, which this is effectively a coup, and we've seen things like like his vice president is that woman Delsey, who's now in charge, and Trump was like, if she doesn't play ball, she'll have a worse fate than him. Well, it's like, well, what the fuck does that mean? Then he's seeing like local governors and mayors and stuff being like, who are technically a part of the Maduro regime, are like, no, like we're still in charge. There's been reports of like independent militias gaining arms, because even if Maduro is not technically being charged with like drug trafficking and narco-terrorism, even that's what he was charged with: narco-terrorism, cocaine trafficking, and illegal weapons possession. There's a ton of weapons there, and like the cartels in Colombia are right next door. Colombia, with between FARC and all these different agencies, like Colombia has had kind of a quiet, it might be dramatic to call it a civil war, but they're a narco state right next door. It wouldn't be hard to get, for these militias to get all sorts of weapons and stuff. And it's like, so do we remove this guy who is a bad guy, and then it just descends into another catastrophic civil war where you're still not able to help the people down there get any of the oil out or anything like that? You look at Libya had its problems, but they had an energy sector. They had something called light gas, which, you know, required little refining, like right up by the surface, so it was cheap and easy to get and refine. And then they take out Gaddafi with no plan to go and put someone else in there, or any sort of stable government. It is a complete failed state. They had like slave markets that you could watch on YouTube or, you know, on the internet, where it's like they're doing all sorts of just like horrible things. And you had like the Benghazi thing. And so there's like, Libya as a country with borders, but it's been an ongoing just like war between these different war leaders and terrorist regimes across that country since we took out Gaddafi. So we're talking about 10, 12 years of like horrible, horrible living conditions in a country that was flawed, but at least stable. Same thing with Iraq. It's like we removed Saddam. There's the big video of them, like the locals tearing a statue down and hitting his face with their shoes and stuff like that. Right when that happened, then you fly the mission accomplished thing or whatever. And then you got sectarian war for indefinitely, you know? And so it's just like, are we, not to say that, you know, the Venezuela culture and everything is similar to what it is in that part of the world. I don't really know, but it just feels like a totally unnecessary risk for us to take. And it's like, we got enough problems here. We got enough problems going on in the world. Like, why are we sparking another one? And if we're able to just go in and take over a country because we feel like it, and that's like Trump's words, like we're going to be in charge, we're going to get the oil going and all that, like we're going to run it. Who are we to say to China that they can't do it to Taiwan, which is right next door, which controls 90% of all, you know, chip manufacturing, so all your cell phones and all that kind of shit. So it's like, what moral ground would we have to stand on to be like, you know, you can't go into Taiwan? Like, what do you mean? You just went and took out Venezuela because you felt like it for their oil. Mm-hmm. I think that's
But aren't they trying to do it under the guise of this weapons thing or like a drugs thing? Like, but
that is the guise.
Yes, but everyone believes the ulterior motives is the oil. Like
there's a lot of states that have, like Ecuador has turned into like a narco state, and Colombia's got their problems, and Mexico's got their problems. We only went in to Venezuela, so I don't think it's a coincidence.
I agree with that, and I would say it's not a coincidence that it's also a country that is, really struggling as far as the citizens able to live.
But I think
there's like the moral thing of like, oh well, we're also helping out.
Yeah, we're liberating them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always the pretext. Like, we're gonna liberate. We're gonna get rid of Saddam, and then democracy is going to spread across the entire region.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of Gaddafi, and democracy is going to spring up. Like, it just, like, that's not, people go in, they try to just assert power where they can. And Syria and all, like, every kind of place that we've fucked around in has ended up leading to like a civil war and failed states. So is he trafficking or facilitating or turning a blind eye at minimum to cocaine trafficking? Probably. Also, there's probably a lot of cocaine trafficking. Everything is done under the guise of fentanyl. It doesn't, at least what I've seen, not a lot of fentanyl coming out of Venezuela. So
I had the DA guy on. He said most of it is China.
So all the precursor ingredients are made in China, and they're shipped and manufactured in Mexico. So we've had a lot less fentanyl coming into the system or coming into the country because we just have a stronger border now. So like that's like the one campaign promise that's happened. So we've seen a lot of these overdose deaths from fentanyl have decreased. But it's not like, you know, I'm not a coke guy, okay? But like to me, there are levels where it's like somebody thinks they're having a Percocet or something, or I don't even know what the pill drugs are, but it's laced with fentanyl. You take it one time and you're dead. Like that to me is not the same as people bringing in cocaine. It's just, to me, it's not. Yeah. Like it's not, neither one of them are good, but fentanyl is a much bigger problem, and it's a much more politically difficult thing to stop because it's Mexico's cartels and it's China's exporters. And so it's like a bordering country that you already have problems with and your biggest trading partner.
So what's going to happen now?
I don't know. This is like totally unprecedented to go and arrest a foreign leader and bring him back for trial in your own country. Like, what do we like? I don't know. I don't know what happens next. They've already dropped like we said, those specific charges. But as of right now, it says he's been charged by federal U.S. prosecutors with multiple offenses related to narco-terrorism, cocaine trafficking, and illegal weapons possession. That's like another one where it's like, how do you charge a head of state with illegal weapons possession? Who's to say? Like, who's to say?
Yeah.
You know, like what weapons are there? I could see if it was like, yeah, they've got a bunch of like dirty suitcase nukes. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. That was like the big fear, that they call them dirty bombs, and they would have like some components for a nuclear device, but they could fit it in a suitcase. And instead of blowing up a city, it would blow up like 6 square blocks or something like that. And then you would have like the radiation everywhere. So people are like very afraid of that, you know, around 9/11 time, the dirty bombs, which never happened, but sounds scary.
Yeah, very.
But it's not like he's being charged with that. He's being charged with like machine guns and shit. Well, it's like, well, he's the commander in chief of the Venezuelan military. So you're saying he can't have guns? Or unless they're saying he's running it and selling guns to terrorist organizations, meaning these cartels. So I don't know. Maduro's, as he left court, he said that he's a kidnapped president and a prisoner of war, which is, I think there carries legal ramifications with that too, because then the only other thing that's sort of like this, but I guess it wasn't a head of state, that you had after World War II, you had a lot of the Nazi parties flee to South America, Adolf Eichmann and people like that, and Israel would charge them with things, and they were living like free lives under different names in Argentina and Chile and Uruguay, and they would like have these things where there's a great movie, I can't think of what it's called right now, where they got Eichmann and they snatched him up in Argentina, they put him on a flight and brought him back to Israel to face trial for war crimes. But he wasn't a head of state. He was just like he was a high-ranking Nazi official, and then just like a John Q guy living a life in hiding in South America, and they went down and snatched him up. So, but that's the only thing where I can think of where you had a high-ranking guy in a government be brought to trial somewhere else. So I don't know how you say like a head of state has no rights to sell weapons or anything like legally. And I'm not like. I'm not saying like, I don't know how I feel about this, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Part of me just feels like we should just stop fucking around all the time. And maybe there's other ways to do this. And if like, you know, if they're going to be a failed state, what responsibility of that is ours? You know, like we'll get our oil from somewhere else kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. It sucks for the people on the ground there, but it's like, so then who else are we responsible for? The entire world?
How do some of the other oil countries feel about it?
I saw like a slideshow. It's not just the other oil countries. Great Britain, France, Germany, China, Russia, like all these places were like, hey, we were not involved in this. We did not know about this. Like, we don't agree with this this policy that, you know, Trump and the Americans are doing. And the only guy that I saw come up being like, congratulations to President Trump for this, you know, brave and whatever mission was Benjamin Netanyahu. You know, who knows where his bread is buttered kind of thing. So everyone else, it seems like, has condemned this. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out or what we're going to do or what, but the whole thing is just like, in a way, like the Iran thing, where you're saying it's one thing after another. The Iran thing was just like, we're really doing this again, you know, like we're getting involved and fucking around in another Middle East country that, you know, who knows how that escalates. Then you got all these other wars. This one is just like, it's so outside the scope of anything that it's not how we typically have done regime change wars the last, you know, 70, 80 years. So it's like a very odd, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. So then who's going to be his lawyer? Does it, you know, like, and where does he, you know,
like can he get I mean, they would never wage war with America, but
who?
Venezuela,
But I think if we had boots on the ground there, you would have militias and people being like, hey, like, this is fucked. Like,
yeah.
Or it could just be like, hey, you know, proof is in the pudding kind of thing, where if we're providing, you know, culturally, like, they're a Christian country, so they would maybe not be, you know, necessarily as opposed, I don't know, than to some of the other things we've done. But it's like, you know, Maduro is, I'm sure, like, they have drug trade there. Is it a thing where it's like a tax? Like, hey, we'll let you run boats and drugs out of our ports and stuff, but like, I get a taste kind of thing? Or is he actively involved? And I don't know. It's like an odd, it is very odd, because it feels like you could have done this, because that was Pablo Escobar's whole thing, where he was getting into politics, because the DEA was after him, obviously, for decades, and he was kind of at war with his own government, and he ran for office. And it's like, his thinking was, well, if I become head of state, like, I'm fucking untouchable. And so it's like, we have to do everything in our power to prevent him from becoming head of state, because he was kind of like Robin Hood, where like Medellin, like, yeah, like he was killing people left and right, but he was building soccer fields and giving money to people, and like he was kind of spreading the wealth for his own like political clout. But if he had become head of state through democratic processes, corrupt or not, then he's like, he's got a seat at the table, and he's no longer just like a, you know, a narco terrorist. Like, you have to deal with him the way you would deal with president of Brazil or president of, you know, France or anything like that. You'd have to, like, he'd send his representatives to the UN. He'd do, you know, like, and it's like, I don't think Maduro is, you know, he's not trafficking obviously at that level, but if he's getting a taste and they're just like, hey, like, we knocked this guy out, we put our American energy sector to work on revitalizing these wells and refineries, then, you know, everybody could potentially benefit. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. It's still early days. He's been arraigned, but there's been no trial. There's been no real updates other than like the ridiculous picture of him with the headphones and
jumpsuit.
Yeah.
That must have been one hell of a mission, dude. Imagine getting that briefing.
Dude.
You gotta go in there and you gotta fucking
snatch this guy up. Exactly. Yeah, and his wife and
crazy.
Yeah.
Insane.
It is like, that part of it is like, holy shit, like, America's unbelievable. You know, like the fact that we can map out, plan out, have our Navy there, guys take off from the boats, they get on shore, they do whatever they have to do against his personal security, snatch him up, get back in the boat, gone, nobody dead. We just got him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Trump, when he's talking about it, he's like, yeah, I watched it. You know, like he can watch it in high def as it's happening, like the greatest TV show of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So it is like our ability, like our military ability is fucking insane.
Truly insane.
Yeah. But yeah, I cannot imagine getting that order and be like, all right, guess we're going in. So I don't know how they get the oil going. I don't know how they resolve any of this, but because Trump did have a quote about Venezuela oil, quote.
Here we are.
Yeah. Trump says Venezuela to give 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. He said that yesterday. U.S. says it will control Venezuela oil exports indefinitely. So it'll be interesting to be like, if you have this country that is desperate for change, at least some people are, and a better standard of living where they can have, you know, food stability and roads and all these things that have collapsed the last 30 years. Could you then, I wonder if they'll be like, you know what, this ain't so bad. I wonder. Mm-hmm. Until you transition into like, hey, like we have our own institutions where we want to have say over our own thing. And if they, you know, maybe it's just a new way to, you know, start anew. Like, I'm not necessarily convinced that this will be a bad long-term outcome, but it's just one of those things where it's like, is it really worth that risk? And then, you know, we had the big Epstein dump, you know, around the holidays, and then this happens and no one's talking about that anymore. So it's almost like a wag the dog kind of thing. Like you would be a great fucking political guy. Just throw the ball down the hall and make everybody else chase it. It's like Eddie 101. And
not true.
Yeah, it is true. So whenever you're in trouble, you just make people think about something else. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out, but it is going to be fascinating. It is, yeah. And it's just, I don't understand anybody, like you've seen all like the typical war hockey kind of Lindsey Graham people like championing this, but it feels like yet another thing for the Republican base that got Donald Trump elected to be fractured over.
Yeah.
So it'd be, you know, the midterms are going to be coming up around the corner. They're going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, we shall see, man. It's a crazy time,
Mm-hmm.
as it's been for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all right, then. Thanks, man. That's it, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll see you then.